Hello and welcome to a super special episode of the Stacey West podcast. Due to poor preparation and planning, I have not numbered this one because it's been a little bit of a rush. So we'll call it a one-off 1 to 24 special. So that makes it 1024 with a dash instead of a 0. My name's Gary Hutchinson. I am one of your regular hosts on the Stacey West podcast and one of your irregular hosts on the Stacey West podcast. An old joke, but never one that gets boring, is Chris Lamming. How are you, my friend?
What's the joke?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the joke is me asking you how you are when we've literally spent all day together.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you. Too hot, though. Too hot. But the aircon in your car was very welcome. And I've just got myself a little fan here to keep me nice and cool while we're doing this.
I've got a fan, but it's Charlie. He's my fan. He supports me everywhere I go. Boom, boom. I'm here all week. Try the fish. Yes, I'm very good. It is very warm. It's been a rush. So for those listening in at home, Chris and I have spent the day together in our matching white T-shirts, although they're not quite matching, but white T-shirt brigade. We were down at the club this afternoon. We've quickly driven home. I've dropped him off in Rugby. We're recording, and then he's getting a lift here and playing pool all evening. So I see him more today than I see my wife, and I'm imagining that she thinks that is an absolutely fantastic state of affairs. Quick hello to everybody who is watching in at the moment, 16 of you on the board. So thank you very much. Spanish Imp, good evening. Dave Sandel, good evening. And somebody called Charlie Beeston, who I happen to know is watching on from Gibraltar. We've been chatting to Charlie's dad today as well. So this isn't a regular Stacey West podcast. This isn't me and Chris talking about Lincoln. In fact, when we come round to Lincoln, all we're going to say is, that's Lincoln. We're going to do a full podcast on it next week. We are going to be predicting League One from 1 to 24. Everybody does it. It gets tiresome, but it's fun. Do you know what? And it's a good way for us to research every other team in the division and hopefully give you a little bit of knowledge as well. If you're listening to this as one of the fans of the other sides and we don't put your team where you think we're going to finish, don't worry. My 1 to 24 last year, I had Fleetwood to be in the playoffs. So there's absolutely no value in this whatsoever other than listening to two guys' opinions. Now, what we've done is myself, Chris, Ben and Charlie all put our 1 to 24s together. We've then merged them. So we have an overall Stacey West 1 to 24. And Chris and I are then going to take you through it from the bottom to the top. Now, there is some difference. So I'm going to be arguing the case of one or two teams to stay up. Chris is certainly going to be arguing the case for one team at least to go down. And then there's only one playoff chasing team that we didn't particularly agree on. Chris got 6 out of 6 at the top. So his is a popular opinion. And my top 6 feature in the overall top 7. So all you're going to get is us talking for 3 minutes-ish, which is going to be a real challenge for Mr. Lamming, about the teams and potentially arguing. It's going to be whistle-stop. We're hoping it's going to be a lot of fun. And so we are going to get straight into it. And I'm going to throw you over to Mr. Lamming to tell you who the Stacey West team think are going to finish bottom of League One this season.
Shrewsbury Town, finishing in 24th position. Is our prediction. We do foresee a challenging season ahead for the Shrews. So last season was one of struggle as well, really. They were the lowest scorers in the league. Actually had the third worst goal difference as well. They were pretty poor. You know, it was a bit of a turgid game against them for Lincoln. Away, at home we were convincing victors. They really needed to improve in their chance creation. And also their goal scoring and losing Daniel Udo in the summer is going to be large in that. Obviously, they've lost Tom Bayliss, who was a performer in a really, really poor team, not playing to his strengths, but he's absolutely a creative player that they've lost and not really replaced. They've made some interesting signings. John Marquis, though, of course, has never really been prolific at this level for quite some time. I quite like JJ Coyote as a striker generally, but not as a goal scorer, more as a facilitator to occupy defenders. And there's not really anyone else of note, I don't think, from a creative perspective. I can foresee a very similar style this season from Shrewsbury. We mentioned it on our Real EFL pod recently, talking about Shrewsbury, that you're not a massive fan of Paul Hurst. It hasn't really convinced you for a little while. I actually think this is nothing to do with Paul Hurst myself. I think this is just he doesn't have the tools at his disposal to be able to create a team that's really capable of easily surviving. I think they're going to be in trouble, and that's where we've put them. We've put them dead last.
I'm still on mute because I was typing a message to you in the private chat, which isn't, and now you're going to check the private chat. So yeah, there we go. So Shrewsbury Town, it could be a long season for Salop. One thing we would say is that the transfer window is still open for a month, so obviously things could change dramatically. But for the team in 23rd, they would have to change fairly dramatically, and we've gone for Crawley Town. Now, last year on the Real EFL, we put together our 1 to 24 in League Two, and Crawley were predicted to finish in the bottom two and be relegated. And manager Scott Lindsay actually spoke about it in a post-match press conference after a friendly, saying we're being predicted to go down. That's madness. We'll prove some people wrong. Didn't they just? They came up through the playoffs. Traditionally, there always feels like there's one League Two team that struggles when they come up. And looking at the squads, if that pattern is to be followed, it will be Crawley Town. They have lost Corey Edai, Liam Kelly, Clady Lolos, and Daniela Orsi all over the summer. And they've lost those for what's reported to be a relatively low fee. There appears to be chaos around recruitment. They have brought in 11 players. Now, it may be smart. Their recruitment model seems to be based more on data than it is on anything else, but it doesn't even look like Scott Lindsay, who, remember, was once on the Lincoln City coaching staff, has been particularly involved. In my opinion, their squad now looks weaker than it did at this time last season, when I was amongst a group of people who were tipping them for relegation out of League Two. So coming up into League One, it's a big ask. Scott Lindsay played an attractive style with Crawley last season, surprised an awful lot of people. It's not as easy to play that style in League One because other teams will try and play attractively, and they will have better players, and they will have deeper squads, and they will have more cohesion. At the moment, there is a bit of a question mark over whether Lindsay will even be there at the beginning of the season. They're owned by a company called WAGMI, which are a kind of cryptocurrency, NFT, American thing. And there's a question mark again over their influence at the club. I think last season they very much seemed to leave Lindsay to it, but it was one of the reasons that we were tipping them for relegation back then. I don't think that they'll be bottom by the record low points or anything like that, but I just think it's going to be a long season for Crawley Town fans.
Can I add a little bit to this?
This is what sends us into Friday. Go on.
No, only really quickly. It's just that
it's not on our list. You're not listening to argue back.
Last season, as I said, they were favourites to go down and they went up. So this season, I think everyone's going to be labelling them again to really struggle. I did predict them obviously as part of this to go down, but I agree with that. I think they're going to be competitive though. I think they might go down, but only by a minimal number of points. That was all. 22nd is Northampton Town, which is a big one because a big old drop off from last season, a 14th place finish last season for Northampton Town. But yeah, I think all four of us foresee a drop off for them in their returns this season. Incomings, James Wilson from Port Vale hasn't been prolific for a long time. Goalkeeper from Wimbledon, decent pickup. Cameron McGeehan in. From Colchester, certainly impressed at this level before, but hasn't been particularly impressive over the last couple of seasons. Callum Morton, we all know what his ability is at this level, sadly. And of course, Tom Eaves, who again has hardly kicked a ball, really, to be honest, for the last couple of seasons. And then Jack Baldwin at centre-half, who's been very much up and down in his career. I think they're reasonable ins if you're looking at Northampton Town in terms of improving a squad, but they've lost 3 really key players in the summer. McWilliams, Northampton born and bred, I seem to think, in terms of the club. He is a real driving force in the centre midfield. He's gone to Rotherham. Tyrese Simpson was a really strong lone player, and he scored 3 goals, but was a real focal point at the top of the pitch for Northampton, a real handful. But the key player here for me is Mark Leonard. Mark Leonard was on loan from Brighton for the previous 2 seasons and only missed 1 league game in that whole time. He was, in my opinion, one of the best midfielders in League One last season, and it doesn't surprise me at all that he's gone and got a big move to Birmingham City. I just don't think they're able to replace the quality of those players, particularly Leonard. And yeah, I think with League One looking tougher this season than it was last, and also with an inconsistent end to the season. You know, last season from February, only 5 teams picked up fewer points than Northampton. So with them arguably having a weaker side now and not really impressing towards the end of last season, yeah, we predicted them to finish 22nd.
We haven't all predicted them to finish 22nd. I have predicted them to finish outside the bottom 4. My reason for doing so, I actually think McGeehan could be a really smart pickup. Really impressed in this division at Barnsley and Leyton as well. He has had a couple of seasons in the cold, but one of those was abroad, I think, in Belgium. Tom Eaves, again, could be a really good pickup, and the way that they play with a single centre forward and then 2 kind of hanging off either side, Pinnock and Hoskins hanging off either side. I really liked Mitch Pinnock last season. And John Brady offers a degree of stability in terms of coaching as well. They were a decent side against us both times that we played them. I've got Northampton just outside the bottom 4, so Cobblers fans, direct all your hate at the other 3. Cambridge United fans, you can direct your hate at me because I have you, or we have you, in the final relegation spot. Now, it feels to me like it's a big season for Cambridge. They were a little bit unlucky last season. I think they lacked identity because they went through 3 managers. Neil Harris really did let them down. Harris went there after leaving Gillingham and obviously moved on really quickly to Millwall. It's a decision that everybody would make. You get an opportunity for a championship job when you've been sacked by a League Two job. It reinvents you very, very quickly. So he couldn't pass it up. I'm not convinced about Gary Monk. I think when they came to our place at the end of last season, I think it was relatively stubborn. They refused to change their shape when they were getting pumped, and they got pumped even more. I think the recruitment looks decent in places. Taylor Richards could be big, but he's not played a lot of football. He's suffered injuries. Ryan Loft's a lump up top. Lavery's quite hard-working presser, quite aggressive, suggests a 5-3-2. I think they're going to feel a lot like Shrewsbury of a couple of years ago. The question then is Monk equal to or greater than Steve Cotterill? Probably not. They're going to be reliant on those 3 who have had 2 of whom have had quite serious injury problems in the past. Lavery being one who's missed quite a few games for Blackpool, and Taylor Richards who's missed quite a few as well. They are on the cusp for me, but I think that this could be the season, unfortunately, that Cambridge drop out of League One. But Chris, I know you don't agree.
Well, I agree they're in that conversation. I think there's a definite kind of 6 or 7 that we all agree are going to be kind of in that relegation battle. I did predict them just to stay up, but I think I agree with the points you've made in that that's the reason why they'll struggle. I do just feel some of the signings they've made do offer a little bit that improves what they were not so good at last season. They really struggled with chance creation. If Taylor Richards rekindles the sort of form he showed at Doncaster a few seasons ago, then he could be the sort of player that creates something out of nothing. And I think defensively they can be solid enough to keep teams out. So I think it depends a lot riding on the loan signing of Taylor Richards for me. But I just felt that maybe they've just got a slightly higher chance than some other teams, but they're definitely going to be in that relegation conversation, no doubt. Who's next? Is it me? Sorry, I'm not quite versed in this yet. Oh, I've got Exeter, haven't I? Okay, no, I haven't got Stevenage.
Stevenage,
sorry, guys. Right, just really quickly, look at all this prep. I don't know what the flipping order we're doing. Right,
yeah, and we're already behind time.
Oh wait, I thought we'd been really quick.
Yeah,
Stevenage. This is a really interesting one because Stevenage had a really strong season last season as a newly promoted team under Steve Evans. Of course, Steve Evans had his head turned a little bit by the Rotherham job. You imagine that he maybe took his eye off the ball a little bit, Stevenage, towards the end of the season. And now they've got Alex Ravel back in charge again. Now, the last time Alex Ravel was in charge of Stevenage, they spent some time towards the bottom end of League Two. He's still been part of the club. I think this is a really important point to make. So we have got Stevenage very much in that relegation conversation. We've got them staying up. And the reason for that is probably squad strength rather than managerial nous. I feel that when Steve Evans recruits a team, he recruits a team to play a very specific style. And you'll kind of almost see these players as Steve Evans players. So there's always a question mark as to whether the players that are kind of effective in that style can translate to a slightly different style. Now, I don't expect them to be massively different under Alex Revell, but it's obviously going to be slightly different. Just like when maybe Matt Bloomfield took over at Wycombe from Gareth Ainsworth, there's some similarities, but there's also someone trying to put their mark on the team. And yeah, again, they only averaged 1 point per game for the last 12 matches of last season as well. So they were within that kind of outside playoff shout for the majority of the season, but the last 12 games, again, they really dropped off. And if you're thinking a continuation of form, they haven't lost many key players, but they have added a couple of decent ones. And we think that's probably the reason that they'll stay up. They've lost Terence Van Kooten, I think was a key player for them. And they've also obviously lost Alex McDonald, who is basically Steve Evans' kind of assistant manager on the pitch, really, isn't he? So it's no surprise that he's gone to Rotherham. The signing of Dan Kemp's an interesting one. And I think mentioned Tyree Simpson. I also like Daniel Phillips from St Johnstone. I think that individual quality will keep them up, but it'll be a season of struggle, certainly.
Yeah, no, I've got them as going down. So for my counter argument, I look at Alex Revell taking over, as Lincoln fans of a certain age would remember George Kerr taking over from Graham Taylor. All too often, the apprentice is simply not as good as the master. And Alex Revell isn't even the apprentice. That's Paul Rayner. The success was based on Evans' style, his bluster, his us against the world mentality. Revell's got to try and replicate that. I don't think he can. The form was poor post-Christmas, and I think that a team, for instance, like Northampton Town, with a little bit more stability, will be able to keep cohesion going through the early part of the season. So that's Stevenage that we have in 20th. And Chris, you're back up again with the team in 19th, Burton Albion.
I am Burton Albion, indeed. So last season finished 20th. We think it's going to be a similar season for them this season, albeit with a brand new squad. Pretty much a whole new team on the pitch. They've signed over 20 players. They've had 16 outs as well. They've basically changed their whole squad. Now, Burton do tend to have quite a large squad churn. They do it most windows, to be honest. Not even every summer. It's every window, really. But they always seem to find a way of just sticking around in League One. There are some really interesting pickups here. Charlie Webster from Chelsea under 21s really stands out as a high quality potential player. Of course, new manager Mark Robinson was Chelsea development manager last season, having previously been manager of a relegated AFC Wimbledon from League One. It was tough last time out for Burton Albion. You can definitely see a different style, or at least the attempt of a different style this season with the signings they've made. There were some that really catch the eye. Elliot Watt's really impressed in League Two, and he's a bit of a Marmite player, isn't he, Elliot Watt? He's really highly technical. You think, how is he playing in League Two? He's much better than that, but he does lack a little bit of physicality and mobility. So you either love him or you hate him, and I think depending on the style, he'll either really suit Burton or he'll just be bypassed. Pre-seasons were worrying. So they lost 3-1 to Mickleover Sports, and most recently lost 3-0 to Belper Town. So they don't, I appreciate you can't read too much into pre-season, but with a new manager, huge squad churn, can absolutely see a challenging start to the season for Burton. But just think they've probably got that little bit extra depth in their squad compared to some of the others down there. And yeah, not quite gelled just yet, but that cohesion will come as the season progresses. And yeah, season of struggle, but just staying up.
So a team that I've got comfortably staying up this season, I've actually got them in 16th. Chris, you're going to argue against because you've got them being relegated. But as a team, as a group, we think they'll finish in 18th position. Is Exeter City. Now I'm going to probably surprise a few people. I quite like Exeter. First of all, I've got an affinity for any team in red and white stripes, but I like their model. I like their ownership model. They're still fan led, but it can be an issue because it means there's a lack of investment. And when you're in a League One where teams like Birmingham are spending millions of pounds, and even teams like us are spending six-figure sums, which we have done, I would imagine, on a player or two this season, it can be very, very hard to compete. Last season they were written off. They had a high squad churn. They lost a lot of their big players, and they still finished 13th 17th. They had a tremendous run at the end of last season. Not quite good enough, because if they'd won their final game of the season, we would have gone through to the playoffs, I believe. So it wasn't quite good enough. But they stuck with Gary Caldwell during a horrible run. They lost, I think, 9-0 to Reading and 5 or 6-0 to Arsenal under-21s in the EFL Trophy. In terms of additions, I think that they've made 1 or 2 really astute additions again this summer. Josh McGuinness is an awful striker to play against, because he's big, he's strong, he's a kind of a Johnson Clark Harris in terms of the target man, but he works harder. He's got international experience. He's been promoted from this division before with Wigan. I like him. Think Jamie Reid at Stevenage, that sort of target kind of all action player. Ed Francis from Gateshead is a really interesting pickup for me. So he's a midfielder. He's former Manchester City. He was a Man City youth. But Gary Caldwell here is a real bonus, I think, for Exeter. And Chris and I were talking earlier about how rarely a manager is mentioned in a preview. It's always pre-season matches. It's always signings. But in Gary Caldwell, Exeter have reinvented themselves in terms of a playing squad. He was able to get new players in on the budget that he works under and mould them into a half-decent side. It took him 6 months to get them firing. He's going to have to do that again. They've lost Alex Hartridge. They've lost 1 or 2 others, Will Aimson as well. But I just think that they will have enough quality, I think, around the squad and enough know-how on the training field just to stay outside that bottom 4.
As you mentioned, I'm the outlier here. I think they could struggle to stay up. Again, I think they're in that same conversation, that kind of bottom 6 or 7 that have all got that kind of equal chance or there or thereabouts. For me, it's just defensive strength and depth. I think all the points you've made further up the pitch are valid. I think really credit to Exeter City for sticking with Caldwell as well in that real tough time. I think if they had kind of pulled the trigger at that point, maybe they'd have struggled for the rest of the season. It takes a bit of battle to do that, and fair play to them. And I think he is a strength for them. It's just, you mentioned they lost Will Aimson, they lost Zach Jules, they lost Alex Hartridge. That's 3 key centre backs, and they haven't really significantly replaced them yet. I just think they're going to ship too many goals. They play half decent football. I also think Dion Rankin was a really threatening play. He got him up the pitch so well in that right wing back position. Didn't always necessarily have the great end product, but he got him up the pitch, and he was terrifying to play against. So he forced the opposition deeper. They missed losing him as well on loan. So yeah, I just struggle to see the solidity in Exeter to stay up. So, but I'm the one that doesn't fit into the pattern here, aren't I?
Never conform. Always be yourself. Unless you are the team in 17th, and then you can be somebody else, because it is Mansfield Town. And as we know, we're not huge Mansfield Town supporters, being Lincoln City fans. However, we have got them staying up. And if I'm honest, we're coming into a pack of teams now, probably from 17th to 11th, that they could finish in any order. They will be the middle of the pack. They will be the comfortable sides, not really troubled by relegation going into the final 3 or 4 weeks of the season, but not in the playoff hunt either. And that's Mansfield Town. Now, actually, there's quite a lot to like about Mansfield Town, I think, this season. Keanu Bacchus is a signing who's going to be massively interesting. He's from St Mirren. He's an Australian international. I think he could be Mansfield's Ethan Aram. He's kind of that type of player. I think he's going to be a strong enforcer. Now, they came up last season actually on the back of playing some really nice football. We watched them. I can't remember if Chris watched them with me, actually. Absolutely destroy Notts County on television. They looked really good. They've kept the spine of the team. So they've got Christy Pym, the goalkeeper. Obviously, we know from his time at Exeter, Aidan Flint, Louis Reed, Davis Keller-Dunn. There's some real consistency there. So they'll be able to carry momentum forward. Unlike Crawley, who have lost players over the summer, there is a real consistency still about Mansfield Town. And we know as a team what that bounce can do for you. We bounced into League One, and Stevenage bounced into League One. A team can do that. There's a couple of other names here as well. Not sure how much they will play this season, but you look at Hiram Boateng and Lucas Akins. They've both been here time and again. They're not top 10 League One players, but they're not bottom 4 League One players there. They are experienced enough to be able to carry the side through. And finally, look at Nigel Clough. Look, Nigel Clough is now probably as experienced as his dad was as a manager. He hasn't won as much. He's done really well getting Mansfield out of League Two for the first time in 10, 15 years it took them to get out of there. He did really well keeping an average Burton side in this division at one point as well. I think that he's going to be just be able to put a nice steady ship together. And Mansfield this season are Leyton Orient and Northampton of last season, and that's why we've got them in 17th.
Yeah, we've got them in 17th, but like as you mentioned, there's a bit of a cut-off here, isn't there, from Mansfield down? Like anything from 17th to 12th or so is likely to finish in any of these kind of mid-table positions. They're out of trouble, basically. And the same, we think, is to be said for Leyton Orient. So we've got here to finish in 16th position. Of course, that does represent a bit of a drop-off from last season with an 11th place finish. A lot of kind of similar conversation here compared to Mansfield in a way. They've got a lot of consistency from last season, but they've a big loss in Rule Sotirio, who was a really interesting player for them, really influential player for them last season. Scored a few goals, but was also just really, really good at bringing others into play as well. Just a threatening player at this level. And they've lost him for nothing as well. He's gone to Bristol Rovers as a really smart pickup by Bristol Rovers. They've also lost Joe Piggott, who never really hit the heights at Orient in League One last season, but was always that focal point up top. And they've replaced him with just Charlie Kelman so far from QPR, who hasn't scored a goal for QPR ever. Scored 3 goals in 11 league appearances for Wigan on loan last season, but hasn't really played a lot of football. I'm just a little bit unconvinced by that. So we can just kind of think in regards to Orient, they're fine. But League One, as mentioned earlier, is probably tougher now than it was last. And if at best their squad is probably on par right now as where it was last season, yet the competition in League One has most likely increased. So we think they've almost stood still in terms of their strength, but they've probably gone down in terms of league position. Again, similar to a couple of other teams we mentioned, they only averaged 1 point a game as well for the last 11 games of the season. So another team that had a slow end to last season, and sometimes it's difficult to kind of get going again. Though, of course, that could be attributed to the fact that they were in a playoff race and then they kind of just fell away from that, and then maybe that drive and that focus just removes a little bit. Though they have had a very successful pre-season. So they've beat Hornchurch 7-0. They beat Hearts 2-1. They've beaten a couple of other non-league teams 5-1 and beat Welling 2-1. No, drew 1-1, sorry. Recently beat Spurs 2-1. One that really stood out to me, though, bit of a side note, they played Juventud de Torremolinos in a pre-season friendly in Spain, drew 0-0. Who currently play in the Spanish 4th tier. Gary, how many teams do you think participate in the Spanish 4th tier?
I would say it's regionalised. So, I don't know, like 80?
90. Yeah, they got promoted from the 5th tier last season. In the 5th tier, there are 324 teams. There are 18 divisions of 18 teams in the 5th tier of Spanish football. Just thought that was really interesting. But from a Leyton Orient perspective, kind of also rans, I think, this season. Never in a danger. Uninspiring, unremarkable, but solid enough. Next.
So in 15th, absolutely not an unremarkable side. A side that divided opinion for us, and a side who probably are the ones that we are most unsure about, and it's Reading. Now, I wanted Reading higher until I realised that they were under a transfer embargo, and Dai Young hasn't gone yet, and Rob Couhig hasn't come in yet. Reading could take off. So they could be the dark horses. They're the ones to keep an eye out for. They've got players like Sam Smith, Lewis Wing, Harvey Nibbs, all solid at this level. Ruben Selles is a great coach. I had huge worries for them last season. Guy dropping out the Premier League, been at Southampton. What's he doing at Reading? He's not going to know what the division's all about. His hands are tied. He can't sign players. And he got the best out of a broken squad. And with everything that was going on away from the pitch, the fact that they were able to avoid relegation with all of the points deductions underlined to me what a great coach Sellers is. However, we can't put them any higher up because we just do not know what's going to happen. Are they going to get the investment? If Couhig, I think I'm pronouncing that right, but if he gets his takeover through and they're able to get some money spent between now and the transfer window and they're able to strengthen that threadbare squad, I think they could take off. Because I think at both times we played them, I thought they were very, very good. I think we drew with them at our place before Christmas. They had a lad on loan who from Copenhagen, whose name escapes me, Mukari, I think it is. He was outstanding. Reading fans tell me he was a little bit hit and miss. They are the one that it is virtually impossible to predict, which is why they are more or less dead central in our table. If they get investment, they will be very good. At this moment in time, it's hard to predict them being any higher than 15th.
Yeah, I think the credit for them is the fact that we've not put them anywhere near relegation, despite the fact they've got a transfer embargo because they were so competitive last season with basically the same squad that they've got now. So we just foresee they're not going to be in any danger at all, but they absolutely could rise up the table. Now, this next one is, I've been so looking forward to.
You're looking forward to this, I know you are.
Yeah. 14th position, we have placed everyone's favourite villains of League One this season. We foresee Wrexham. And this isn't really just to be quirky and to kind of just, annoy Wrexham fans. Genuinely just don't see them having the squad to really compete right at the top end of League One. I think Wrexham fans absolutely will be expecting that, which I think maybe will be a bit to their detriment potentially this season. But they started last season really slowly. They were great towards the end of the season in League Two. But yeah, like sometimes you just, like you mentioned, there are lots of other factors that go into to kind of describing or predicting where a club is going to finish. You mentioned managerial strength. You mentioned, obviously, but normally it's the squad is what you're analysing here. But obviously there is a bit of a fanfare and a bit of a sideshow around Wrexham now, which of course I think has been a net positive for them overall. But this season, I just don't know if I can see that being as positive. And just purely on the pitch, Arthur Okonkwo, being able to sign him permanently is a really good pickup. He's going to be a top goalkeeper in this league. He was by one of the best goalkeepers in League Two last season, if not the best. George Dobson, I think, is a smart one. He's going to add some real bites to midfield, some real energy, something that I think was probably lacking a little bit in Wrexham's team in the centre of midfield. And they've also a notable signing. They signed Lewis Brunt from Leicester. So Leicester was on loan in League Two at Wrexham's promotion rivals Mansfield Town last season, and it was a really, really strong performer in League Two. I think if the sort of sign that we'd make, we'd be really kind of pleased with it. 23-year-old centre back was on loan from Leicester. They've signed him permanently, but it appears that everything was signed and sealed for him to go to Peterborough United. Only for Darren McCantley to recently come out and say, "Yeah, we absolutely were in for him." But Wrexham came in at the last minute and offered £3,000 a week more than what Peterborough were offering. And you think just the amount of money that's floating around there, it seems a little bit. Well, obviously, it's inflated. That's the only reason they've been able to get to where they are now. I just think you can only go so far with that mentality. And on the pitch, the centre forward line's ageing, the majority of it. Plus, they've got Paul Mullen, who's unproven in League One, despite being incredibly productive in League Two and obviously the National League. He's never played in League One, to my knowledge, and not as consistently. So I think there are a few question marks here. I just think they're better. I think that at the top end of League One, it's tough. And I just think there are better teams, more equipped than Wrexham. And also, I think a key part of this is flexibility. I think there's more flexible teams than Wrexham as well. So, yeah, they've had an impressive pre-season, though, out in America, beating Vancouver most recently 4-1, and also drawing with both Bournemouth and Chelsea. So there's no doubt that they've got, competitive squad. I don't think there'll be any danger at all. They'll definitely be looking up, but just can't see them having a stronger squad than some of those other teams ahead of them.
Paul Mullen, 3 goals in 20 for Tranmere in the 2019-20 season. Other than that, not played League One. And what I would also say is that the goalkeeper, his brother, is likely to be in goal on Saturday for Arsenal under-21s against Lincoln. Joel. They are goalkeeping brothers. We're talking about a team with money in 14th, and we cap off the bottom half of the table, and we're actually in time. So well done, Chris, for that. We actually cap it off with the team in 13th, and we're talking money again. We are talking Wycombe Wanderers. Now, Wycombe have just been taken over once again. Lots of money coming into them. So we think they're going to have a decent season. But I think they're one that might just be going for broke a little bit, because when spending caps do come in based on income rather than how much your owner has, Wycombe may struggle. So they are throwing some cash at it. Alex Hartridge being one example from Exeter, who I understand was on the radar of other League One clubs and just literally blown out the water by Wrexham's money. They've obviously taken Daniel Udo as well, who was at Shrewsbury, who... decent enough lad. He came from Telford to Shrewsbury, so he came out non-league. He was, smashed Adam Jackson's face up with an elbow, if I remember, a season or two ago. So he's not particularly liked. Not a massively prolific striker, but a very Wycombe striker. If you looked at a striker and said, who will Wycombe sign out of League One last season, Udo screams Wycombe to me. I like Matt Butcher, who plays for them. I like Luke Lee on the left flank, I think, or he plays left-sided centre half, or he can play in the midfield. They're all dependable. So what Wycombe have got at the moment is a good, dependable League One side. It depends whether they add what I've put on my notes as vavavoom. Can they sprinkle it with some pace up top? Gareth McCleary, who I've always liked, is 37 now. Can he be relied upon? I'm not so sure. But if they're able to bring in some big A-listers from between now and the beginning of the season, there's a potential they could be a little bit higher. They were clinging on to the coattails of the promotion race last season. Obviously got through to the EFL Trophy final as well. Matt Bloomfield did a decent job post Gareth Ainsworth. It was a big ask to try and get them back to a decent level. They had a horror start. They stuck with him. He did very, very well. All that you've got to ask about Wycombe is beyond this season, because if they don't make the top 6, they're one of the teams that you're looking at going, they could be in some serious trouble. And there will be Wycombe fans who will watch this and go, nonsense, we can afford it, blah, blah, blah. I've had it with Birmingham fans, all that. Don't care. That's my opinion, and that's all there is to it. So that caps off the bottom half of the table. If you're listening at home, you're about to get an advert. But if you're watching, we're just going to carry on with the team in 12th, Chris.
Top half of the table. I think this is another line in the sand here a little bit. So we mentioned kind of that bottom sort of 6 or 7, and then anyone in that kind of mid-table could finish anywhere. I actually think anyone from 12th upwards will back themselves for having a realistic chance of a playoff push. And I think Bristol Rovers are the first team that would consider themselves in that conversation. And we agree. We think they're going to be at the end of that, but we certainly feel that they could be in that conversation. Last season, of course, I think can be defined as inconsistent. But for a lot of the season, they, of course, had a petulant child in charge of them. And now they've actually got a grown-up in Matt Taylor. That can only help. I also think that they've made some really smart business in this summer transfer window. They've lost Anthony Evans to Huddersfield. He's a real key player for them last season. Got a good fee for him, though, as well. But they've reinvested quite smartly. Promised Amachere, a player that I've always quite liked. Was a big player for Fleetwood. I'm surprised at the reported fee, but I certainly think he's a good player at League One level. Never prolific, but absolutely occupies defenders. Could be a really, really smart pickup. Certainly if he partners Raul Sotirio up front, who we've already mentioned, they've signed on a free, by the way, from Leyton Orient. I think that's a really smart front too in League One. Josh Griffiths in goal. We know he's absolutely a relatively dependable League One goalkeeper. They've also signed Clinton Moller, one of Reading's only outgoings actually this summer, but one of their key performers from last season. Isaac Hutchinson, also a really impressive player at Walsall last year. What they've done is they've added to what they've got. And I think they've been really smart with their recruitment, and they've improved in the areas of the pitch that they needed to improve in. They've also had a pretty impressive pre-season, beating a couple of non-league teams, but also most recently beat Wayne Rooney's Plymouth Argyle, who I imagine for the majority of this season until he's sacked will always be known as Wayne Rooney's Plymouth Argyle rather than just Plymouth Argyle. And also beat a Portuguese side, Portimonense, 2-0 as well recently. They've been good, and just think they've got a strong squad. They've got a good manager. I actually think Matt Taylor was a really smart appointment by Rotherham and was unlucky to lose his job. It was just situation more than anything. It's like following Alex Ferguson sometimes, isn't it? And I think he's a really good manager at this level. So yeah, we see Bristol Rovers probably being a similar conversation to a lot of the next sort of 4 or 5 clubs, really, with a realistic chance of a playoff push with a little bit of luck.
Now we've got a team in 11th who certainly split opinion massively amongst the Stacey West team, to a point where one of the team had them in the playoffs and another member had them in the bottom half. This guy. And it's Barnsley. Now, on my notes, I've literally put not happy about this because I'm arguing for them in 11th, and I think that they will be lower. I think former Bristol Rovers manager Darryl Clark, who is at Barnsley, will finish below Bristol Rovers. But the Stacey West team have forced my hand. We are a democracy, not a dictatorship. And so I'm arguing the case for them being in 11th. But it's not going to be a positive thing. Now, bear in mind, Barnsley twice have made the playoffs in successive seasons. they would expect to be there again. But they've lost a big chunk of last season's squad. We're talking the likes of Herbie Kane, Devante Cole, Nicky Cadden, players that, okay, Cole didn't score a lot of goals from at the end of the season, and he's not somebody that I ever rated, but he was quite big for what he did. Herbie Kane was a big player for them as well. You saw that they lacked confidence towards the end of last season. They didn't actually they did make the playoffs, didn't they? They
just,
did.
Yeah.
Just clung on to it after nearly throwing it away. They were appalling in the second half of the season. The manager went just before the end, before the playoffs. I can't see them replacing the players that have gone. They certainly haven't done so far. Looking through their signings, okay, they've brought in Matthew Craig, I think, on loan from Tottenham, but at the moment nothing jumps out and says that's a great signing for me. And then there's question marks over Darrell Clarke. Now I know he's a nice guy, okay, not personally because I've never met him, but in football he's really highly regarded. Didn't keep Cheltenham up last season. Now, okay, that's not the worst thing in the world. You know, it's like saying, oh, I didn't manage to carry Steve Evans 30 yards on my shoulders. It's a tough job and not everyone can do it. But I kind of got the feeling that there was a little bit more from that Cheltenham side. They were decent, but he's been sacked by Port Vale at this level from after Lincoln, actually, after we beat him. He was the one of the managers that we got the sack. He's been sacked from Bristol Rovers at this level. I'm not sure he has what it takes to finish in the top six, and it looks to me like there's a little bit of a readjustment at Barnsley. I think that there may be one of the sides that are looking at the impending regulations and beginning to rely a little bit more on youth, a little bit more on that academy. They have a good academy. Good players have come through Barnsley. It's a good catchment area. They're a good club. But if that's the case, then the appointment of Darrell Clarke, who works with experienced squad and experienced players, doesn't quite align. So I feel that there might be a little bit of a friction in terms of the club's ethos this season. I think that will derail any potential playoff push, and I think this is the season where Barnsley don't become the big club that have dropped out of the Championship. This is a season where you begin to look at them as a League One club, as we have, for instance, Charlton Athletic over the last few seasons.
Yeah, I agree. They're going to miss out on the playoffs. Obviously, I did put them higher than you. You put them like 14th or something. But yeah, absolutely see a drop off. I think they'll still be a tough side to play against. They're not as tough as last season. Obviously, we had some good performances against them. But I mean, just generally speaking, over the league, they were, because apparently the league table never lies. They were apparently the sixth best team in the league, even though we probably disagree with that at times. But I think they've got really good strength in their midfield, particularly. They invested quite a bit last January, meaning they don't need to invest as much now, despite losing a few players. They did have a deep squad last season. Midfield, for example, has still got Josh Benson, a really good player, Phillips, Luca Connell, and somehow Callum Styles is still playing in League One after recently representing Hungary at the Euros. He has no right in League One. He's a cut above at this level. So they've got some really good individual quality. I just think the individual quality in itself isn't enough sometimes, and yeah, I can see them missing out the playoffs for that, definitely.
So who do we have
Blackpool
in 10th,
next? We have Blackpool. I was there. I was going there. We have Blackpool in 10th, of course. Last season finished 8th, just missing out on the playoffs, and of course, we had a shout right up until the end of the season for potentially sneaking into them. They had a strong season last season, of course, narrowly missing out, but summer business for me just keeps their squad in a very similar position in terms of quality. I don't feel they've taken a huge step forward, and as I've mentioned, League One, particularly right at the top end, is probably always, there's more teams towards the top end that are competitive now than there was last. And if you're standing still in terms of your strength, you're probably actually taking a step back in terms of league position. So yeah, we've seen them kind of just finishing a couple of spaces below where they finished last season. There aren't really many other things to say about Blackpool because they've got the same manager, a manager who knows the club well, has got some good respect, and has definitely, I think, earned some credit back with the fans after a bit of a challenging exit first time round. But last season, they started the season slowly, and they didn't enter the top 10 until mid-October, despite being in and around the playoff race ever since then. I just think you can't get away with a slow start like that this time round in a stronger League One. And if, again, their pre-season results are anything to go by, I know you can't read too much into pre-season results, but this does stand out a little bit. So they have played AFC Blackpool, who play, I think, in the 9th tier or 8th tier. They lost 1-0. They lost 3-1 to AFC Fylde, drew 0-0 to Cadiz, beat West Brom 2-1, and their last 3 friendlies lost 1-0 to Sunderland, 3-1 to Accrington, and 3-1 to Tranmere. So they, 1 or 2 pre-season results, you can kind of go, it's only pre-season. But actually, I think to have lost 5 of your 7, and every single loss bar 1 being against a team in the league below you, I think that you can read a little bit into that in regards to maybe a slow start. I just think they might not be able to catch up as well as they did last season. Just basically be punished from a slow start this time round with a squad that's no stronger than last season.
I see I'm putting 4 or 5 past Crawley on the opening day.
Well, the thing is that could be a good confidence boost, couldn't it, for them? Absolutely.
Like Barnsley did against Port Vale last season. Okay, so I know everybody's watching going, where are we going to predict Lincoln City? So in 9th, we have Stockport County. And you're going to hear a little bit from me.
You threw me there.
Now, Stockport County, I'm going to be honest, when I did my 1 to 24, it's been a busy week. I've had an awful lot on. So I filled in the top 6 or 7, filled in the bottom 5 or 6, and then the middle just kind of banged it all together. And then when I sat down to chat to Chris and we kind of started talking things through, I realised how much I had undervalued Stockport County. While we have been on air, we have slightly adjusted the league table. So we've got Stockport in 9th. Now, there are a lot of reasons to like Stockport. What I would say is it's nice to be talking about them as a team on level pegging with us again, because they went down with us in 2011, and then I think they had Didi Hamann in charge, and they dropped into the National League North. So they've plunged deeper depths than us. So to have them back up here is great. A good, proper, old school football club that we've had so many duels and battles with over the seasons. I'm not excited to play Stockport because nobody's excited to go to Stockport, but I'm feeling that this is something that's quite positive. We've got them in 9th because I also think they've got a really good squad. They have kept the bulk of their squad together. They were runaway leaders for a very, very long time last season. They faltered a little bit. It's easy to have a wobble. We talk about momentum. When you're coming up from the division, there is always one team that doesn't just do well, that exceeds. Last season, it was Stevenage. They had that momentum from their promotion. One season, it was us. There's always a team, I think, that does well. And it does feel like Stockport are the best place to do that. There's some names I want to roll off. Nick Powell, who was at Manchester United. He's been at Crewe. I think he's been at Preston North End. Fantastic player now. He has matured and got the attitude right. Michael Mellon up top, prolific for Morecambe for a long while, was on loan, I think, at Dundee as well. He's a Burnley player. I think he's on loan at Stockport. I don't think they bought him. Fantastic pickup. He will do well at this level. Lewis Fiorini, we know all about him. Chris and I earlier were talking to Adam Jackson about him, what a great player he was, how he definitely caught fire that season. Interesting signing in Jack Diamond, dare I say. I'm not sure that Diamond has got what it takes to be a regular at this level, but if you're 1-0 down, you need to get up the pitch and you've got the last 20 minutes and you need to scare a fullback. You bring somebody like Diamond on, he will do that. He'll carry the ball, he'll get at players. So it's really interesting. I think they've added wisely. I think they're a side that are on an upward trajectory. They've played championship football much more recently in their career, in their history than we have. They are equipped for lower end championship football in the modern world. And so we have Stockport County in 9th. We are very quickly going to brush over the team in 8th because there's a whole podcast to dedicate to it. So we predicted Lincoln City to finish 8th. We've said we're not going to talk about it anymore. We will give all our reasons why we've predicted them to finish 8th. And in fairness, there was only a positional change of 3 between all 4 of the Stacey West team. So between 8th and 11th. And that means you've got to listen to me while we move into the final team in the mid-table pack, just outside the promotion race. Now, Chris is going to, I believe, talk about Wigan as well, because I actually put Wigan in 6th, but we collectively have put them in 7th. Now, I think Wigan were very, very good last season when we played them. They were able to hurt us. They were tight at the back. That 0-0 that we played before Christmas, where Chris and I raved about it on the podcast and everybody said, you two don't know what you're talking about, was one of the best games of the season. It was like a game of chess. One slip, they could have hurt you. We were trying to unpick their back line. Absolutely superb. Now, they may lose Charlie Hughes, who is a massive player for them at the back. They may lose the keeper, whose name escapes me. But I believe Mr. Tickle, Sam Tickle, that's it. But if they do, I believe that they're the sort of team that will have the recruitment plan in place. They feel like they are run much better these days than they have been in the past. I believe they've signed Will Aimson, which is a great pickup at this division, this level. He's been around this division for a very, very long while. They have tapped into the loan market quite cleverly. So we've got Calvin Ramsey and Joe Hugel have come from Liverpool and Manchester United, respectively. You don't get players from Man United and Liverpool academies that don't have a little bit about them. They're not relying on those players, but they're the peppering around what is a really good League One squad. Johnny Smith, I rave about him every single season. I did it at Burton. He tore us apart on the Boxing Day. Every time I see him, he's like a little pocket rocket. He gets on the ball, he gets in the spaces, he delivers a pass. When he's bad, he's bad. But I think he has more good days than bad days. Matt Smith as well in the midfield, who could theoretically drop into the defence if need be. I think he's great at this level. Look, without the points deduction last season, they would have been, I think, something like 8th or 9th. But talking earlier to Chris, I feel that without the off-field problems distracting, some of the games they lost, they might have drawn. Some of the games they drew, they might have won. I think had Wigan been on a level pegging with everybody last season, they could well have been the top 6. This season, there's no points deduction. They seem to be pulling in the right direction. And last but not least, Sean Maloney. Again, and we don't want to keep name dropping, but we're talking to Tendai Darikwa earlier about Wigan, and he said Sean Maloney he's a great manager. And I think that, again, that consistency puts Wigan not just in the playoff race this season, but if they don't make it in the playoff race until they do get promoted, I can't see them going on a downward trajectory.
Yeah, they've got a real alignment, it seems, within the club, doesn't it? You know, Will Aimson, for example, the signing of that was mentioned that he was at Hull as a youth, as a youngster when Sean Maloney was there, and also Tom Huddleston is now joined Wigan as a coach. They were all together. So that sometimes it's jobs for the boys, you see that, but also with the other signings they're bringing in, you can see quite a lot of alignment in the club there. I just feel that I actually put them a lot lower than this. I still put them in the playoff conversation, but certainly lower than 7th. But you kind of won me over there a little bit, mate. To be honest with you, with your argument. I would just say, on paper, I just don't think they've strengthened as much as other teams have. But the more you look into this, the more holes you can kind of pick with others as well. And I actually think there are fewer holes in Wigan than there are to other teams. So I actually, probably should have put them a little bit higher in my predictions as well. So I just get on board with what you said, to be honest. Now, the next one is, of course, our first team that we predicted collectively to finish in the playoffs. And this is, I must admit, through gritted teeth, because we've predicted Rotherham United, managed by everyone's favourite pantomime villain, Steve Evans. Oh, I hate this. But he's good at it, isn't he? He is good at it in regards to making a team incredibly hard to beat. Playing a style which is, if you're not on it that day, you're going to get bullied. Now, they will lose games against better footballing teams that are up for the fight as well. So I don't think they're anywhere near top 2 territory here. But I just think they're going to win the games that should be winning on paper. The squad is really strong. Again, made a lot of signings, but made a lot of signings early. Steve Evans always makes a lot of signings early. He's just signed players that are absolutely tried and tested at the top end of League One on the whole. It pains me to say, and I hate crediting the guy, but I think they're going to be Stevenage last season, but they've got better players. And Stevenage weren't a million miles away from the playoffs, and they only fell off after you expect. Steve had his head turned a little bit by a potential move to Rotherham. I don't want it to happen, but I think they'll sneak in there. I don't think they'll win the playoffs, by the way. I think they'll get beat by a much better team. But we think they'll finish 6th. And I hate myself for saying it. I feel dirty.
Now, we don't all think they'll finish 6th, do we?
Well, you didn't.
Because
all 3 of us did, though, apart from you, didn't we?
Apart, I think we've got them 5th. Charlie has got them 6th. No, that's Rotherham. That's Peterborough. You 4th, Charlie 4th, Ben 5th. I've got them outside the playoffs. And partly because I just hate Evans and I can't predict them in the playoffs. Now, I have general reasons for it. I don't think it matters who Steve Evans manages. There's a ceiling. Gillingham on the cusp of the playoffs, didn't quite make it. Stevenage on the cusp of the playoffs, didn't quite make it. Peterborough didn't get them through into the playoffs. It doesn't matter whether he has money or not. The style that he plays, it doesn't matter whether he's got better players or not. You say that they'll get beaten by better sides, the footballing sides. So Peterborough, Charlton, Huddersfield, Bolton, Birmingham, Wigan, these are teams that will have a style that I think will be able to not just match up with Rotherham, but also counteract their bullying. Okay, they might bully Crawley, they might bully Exeter, they might bully teams that try and play a little bit of football, but without the players. Recruiting all these players like he does, I don't think that that's particularly the right way to go. Rotherham didn't need massive wholesale changes. Sure, they were relegated, and they were relegated with very few points last season, but they still had decent players. It was more, in my opinion, down to a kind of a degree of management. I don't think since he took Rotherham through the divisions, League Two and League One, I don't think Steve Evans has done anything that's remarkable at all. He hasn't got Mansfield promoted. Okay, you can go, oh, he's done really well with Stevenage. But it's just that you can get promoted out of League Two by being big, ugly, and nasty. You can do it. You can bully teams. You know, we did it really a little bit under Danny and Nicky. But I think you get found out in League One, and I honestly think that what they are trying to do is recreate past glories at Rotherham, and it's the wrong man to do it.
I get your argument, and I want to agree with you because I don't like Steve Evans, obviously. I think you underestimate his sides at your peril. Certainly when you've got the ball, I think in possession they're not easy on the eye. You know what you get. I think they're underrated out of possession. I think they're really good at stopping opposition teams playing, and like I said, teams that can overcome that, I think will be the strongest teams in the league. So we don't think they're going to be up there. But the reason I put them in the playoffs is I think they're bully you in possession, and out of possession they stop you playing. And I think he's going to be able to do that easier at Rotherham than he did at Stevenage, and he did it all right at Stevenage, as much as I hate that. So yeah, collectively just squeezing into the playoffs. But as we mentioned, I think probably the next one, the team in fifth that you're going to talk us through, all the way down to 12th, we kind of almost put all those teams in a similar position in that they've got a chance of a playoffs, but not really guaranteed it.
Yeah, so the team we've put in fifth, we've probably done so more on history, and I know some people are predicting them much lower. And it's our friends from down the A15, potentially.
A1, isn't it?
You know, you might go Bourne way. You might go down Sleaford and Bourne. It's Peterborough United anyway. Don't matter how you get there, but when you do get there, they're a club that are no bigger than us in terms of ground support, but have a much better history in recent seasons than us. I did some numbers the other day, and the number of times they finished outside the top 10 in League One over the last 10 years when they've been in it has been minimal, if at all. They need some work this season. They will not be as good as they were last season. They have lost key players to is it Harrison Burrows off the top of my head, and the centre half, I haven't actually made a note of his name. Johnson Clark Harris has gone. They lost the winger to Coventry, but they always recruit well. Now there is actually, I've said that, there is a misconception that Peterborough always recruit well. They don't, but when they do recruit well, they recruit very, very well. And when they don't recruit well, the player just slides off into oblivion. Alex Woodyard as a classic example. We think Nevitt from Rochdale is a decent signing. I know for a fact Adebisi from Crewe is an outstanding signing. Chris Con Clark, who I kept saying his name over and over when I put the aircon on earlier, could be another signing. They are so Peterborough. It's like we said in the car, you look at those players, who's going to sign those players this summer? It's going to be Peterborough, isn't it? Darren Ferguson. I dislike the man, to be honest. I do. But he does understand this level better than anyone. And whilst he might not quite have what it takes to finish top two, I do have a feeling that he's got what it takes to finish top six. The question is, can he replace Harrison Burrows? Can he replace, is it Ronnie Edwards, I think is the other one that left, isn't it? Can he find an attacking source? They've still got Poku. I think it'll be a big season for him. Ricky J. Jones is a player. I think there's a lot of expectation around certainly this season. I still like Adjaboy. He's on the transfer list, but whether he'll go or not, I don't know. Jack Sparks is a decent signing. They've got a lot of work to do around the defence, which I think that was why some people are a little bit concerned about them. But I have zero doubt that they will sort those questions out before the end of the season. So we've got them in the playoffs. I think it is a fool who predicts them to be anywhere else. given their recent history, given their recruitment, and given the war chest that they will have after Burrows and Edwards have gone, because, that's brought money into the club. They will spend it wisely. Peterborough United, 5th.
Yes. Now, the big movers in League One this season is predicted to be Charlton Athletic. We predict them to finish 4th after a finish of 16th last season. A huge jump up in our predictions. Now, I've seen Charlton in a lot of different predictions being placed. Some people are predicting them similar to last season. Some people are predicting them in top 2. There's been a lot of variance in Charlton Athletic predictions, and we're definitely getting towards the top end of that. Now, the reason for this is, well, firstly, when Nathan Jones took over last season, they were rubbish. They were really poor, really, really poor. And he was in charge of 16 games towards the end of last season, and then he lost twice. Only lost 2 games for the rest of the season. I appreciate they actually lost 10. They actually drew 10, I think, of those of those 16 games and won 4. So they didn't quite get to the other end of that. But my goodness me, did they stop the rot and pull themselves well clear. Also, hasn't been mentioned yet, everyone's favourite stat, XG. Here we go. This XG table includes the whole season. So this includes when they were crap up until the point that Nathan Jones took over, and their performances under Nathan Jones as well. XG4, they were 9th in the table, the 9th best XG created. But also their XG against was the 11th best as well. So even over the course of the whole season, in terms of the overall XG table, this should have been a mid-table side. So you'd expect, with that encompassing the whole season, if we just look at what the influence Nathan Jones has had on that club, and it has been significant, whether you like him or not. Even with last season's squad in terms of the squad list, I think all of us put in the playoffs last season. They really underachieved, but the squad was certainly on paper a playoff contender, and actually statistically under Nathan Jones last season, in terms of chance creation and chances against, they were probably on par with being a playoff chasing team in terms of actual performance level. So now with a full pre-season under Nathan Jones, and also peppering the squad with some really interesting pickups that I think improve the overall quality of the team, I can really see them, to be honest, being quite cemented in the playoffs this season. I think they will finally, once and for all, kind of live up to their expectations a little bit. Alpha May, of course, on paper is a big loss. I actually don't think he offered a huge amount in build-up. I think you always need someone to put the ball in the back of the net. But getting him near enough £1 million for him, I think, is really good business. I guess Anna Hadmay is really interesting. I think he'll thrive in a good side. I also think Matty Godden is going to be a good pickup at this level. We know how good and how solid Alex Mitchell is in League One. And Luke Berry, of course, is a really dependable player they picked up again as well, who previously played under Jones at Luton, plus some others as well. I just think the ins outweigh the outs. And a full pre-season under Nathan Jones means they can kick on from the much improved form that they showed in the last sort of quarter of last season. So yeah, for me, actually a solid playoff contender here. I think this is for me the first one. I thought, yeah, they'll definitely be in there.
Well, the second one that we think, yes, they will definitely be in there, and we've got them finishing in 3rd, is Huddersfield Town. Now, the biggest thing for me with Huddersfield Town, and we'll talk about players, we'll talk about all sorts, but I think it's Michael Duff. Now, he had a rotten time at Swansea, but he is a 5-time Manager of the Month winner, twice in League 2, 3 times in League 1. He brought a pretty poor Cheltenham team, or pretty average Cheltenham team, dare I say, into League 1 against all odds from League 2. He's a manager I really like, and I think he is a great appointment for Huddersfield. He did well with Barnsley, took them to the playoffs. I like Duff, so he is the first reason that I think Huddersfield will do well, because at the moment he's still a young manager, he's still an exciting manager, but I think he's a really good manager. You then look at their transfer business. Okay, they've signed Lasse Sorensen. We know that it's painful. Lasse is a great pickup for a team dropping out of the Championship, because he typifies what a League One player should be. He works hard, he's committed, he will get up and down all day long. And sometimes teams dropping out of the Championship underestimate those qualities. They think they need to buy ball players. They think they need to buy the fancy midfielder who can twist and turn and beat players. But sometimes, do you know what? You've got those players when you've already been in the Championship. What you need is work rate. What you need is heart. What you need is desire. They've signed Michael Miller, I think, plays on the other flag. Another great example of the right pickup for a team coming out of the Championship. Now, we will talk about teams in League One at the moment, aiming way out of the stratosphere. But Huddersfield have been really smart. Herbie Kane, key part of the Barnsley side. We talked about what a loss he's been for Barnsley. What a capture he is for Huddersfield. Why? League One, consistent, understands the level. Anthony Evans, a player that once we were actually linked with, I seem to remember.
Yes, when he was at Paderborn.
When he was at Paderborn. Come from Bristol Rovers. Again, functional, done really well. What a great signing. Their business has been around picking the best players from League One that they can get to fit their style. And I respect that. I respect that more than a team that comes in throwing £2-3 million at people who have come from the top flight in Germany or the top flight in the Netherlands. They've done it right. You then look at some of their existing players as Mikkel Helik. I hope I pronounced that right. He's played 7 times for Poland. If he remains there, he could be big. They've got Matty Pearson. Believe it or not, a one-time imp. Played twice on loan from Blackburn, I think under David Holdsworth. Since then, he's played for Luton. He's played regular Championship football. Really, really good signing. A really good player, sorry, I beg your pardon. Reece Healy joined them in January. Reece Healy, the last time he was in this division with MK Dons, scored 12 in 20 and moved to, I think it was Toulouse for a couple of £1 million. Sometimes the players that get you relegated out of the Championship are just enough quality to get you promoted back out of League One. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's the only setback for Huddersfield, is that they've got 26, I think, maybe 25 now of the squad that got them relegated, tied on contracts in League One. So they've had to be selective about their recruitment. They haven't been able to do the overhaul. But I actually think that's really going to work in their favour. I don't like Huddersfield because they took Harry Toffolo, they took Danny and Nicky, they took Gary Taylor-Fletcher, they've taken Lasse Sorensen, they took my pride, dignity and belief in life when they beat us in the playoffs after Dandy Booth dived. I have every reason to dislike them, but they're doing things the right way, and I think that they will finish third, if not higher.
Yes. Interesting Huddersfield. I think for the first time for a long time, they've had a sensible summer. They're doing things just smartly. And they ever since they got relegated from the Premier League, that hasn't really happened. I think they finally just kind of gone back to doing what they've kind of done quite well historically. And they're a big club at this level. There's no denying that. But we have got them finishing just behind Bolton, who we predict will finish second and go one better than last season. Hey, the league table never lies, right? You know, Bolton didn't deserve to go up. They were the third best team in the league. Absolute rubbish. They were by far better than Derby, in my opinion. And anyone that says the league table doesn't lie, remember, 2 seasons ago, Ipswich came second to Plymouth, and now they're in the Premier League. So be quiet, please. I think Bolton were really unlucky not to go up. Derby, obviously, credit to them in terms of being able to scrape the wins together towards the end of the season to cement that top 2 position. But I think Bolton were, other than Portsmouth, the most complete football club and football team in League One last season. They've not lost anyone of note. They've added a couple of really interesting signings as well. Last season, they were the top goal scorers in League One, and they also conceded fewer goals than everyone else in the playoffs. So they were absolutely well within their rights to feel aggrieved at not getting in the top 2, though they did miss out by a few points in the end. For me, they just have quality. They've got deep squad of high quality, a superb manager. Ian Evatt is a brilliant manager at this level. But what really impresses me about Bolton, and I've mentioned this before, is they can win in so many different ways. They can play outstanding football. They can play you off the park if you're not on it, but they can also win ugly. They are the masters of the dark arts and game management. And I just think they'll finally take that extra step after a season on season on season of continuous improvement under Ian Evatt. The next logical step is, of course, automatic promotion to the Championship. So, yeah, we have Bolton in second position. Do you think it'll be tight between them and Huddersfield? We do feel there are just fewer question marks over Bolton than there are Huddersfield. I do think they'll be really strong. So, yeah, Bolton Wanderers, second position, automatic promotion, back to the Championship once again.
And in the least surprising news of the day, even less surprising than the sun coming up in the morning and going down in the evening, we're predicting Birmingham City to win League One. There are many reasons for this. It's so easy, niche and trendy to go, money doesn't buy you success, but it does buy you success when you've got so much of it and everybody else has so few. We're talking about a £20 million transfer budget at Birmingham and the rest. They're able to recruit massively. And if you think money doesn't buy you success, ring up somebody who supports Manchester City and ask them. When you can buy players like Birmingham have been able to buy and pay the wages they've been able to pay, you should be better than everyone else. I'm not sure which team fans will want to fail more, Wrexham or Birmingham, because that's the level, I think, of jealousy that their transfer budget inspires. The fact is, they've got the money, and I think even under a football regulator, with their owner, with the size of their ground, with the size of the club that they are, they've got the money. Make no mistake, when Sunderland were at this level, it was big news. Birmingham City, in my opinion, are as big as Sunderland. That's the size of this football club. And they have gone over and above anything Sunderland did. We're talking Christoph Clara, who was in the Bundesliga. We're talking Alex Cochrane, who was playing for Hearts last season. Willem Willemsen, who was an Icelandic international. Emil Hansen, Alfie May, Mark Leonard, who we have raved about consistently from Northampton Town. I mean, these are all absolutely fantastic additions. But we're not just talking about the additions here. Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson, Christian Bielik, Lee Buchanan, that's their back four. That's a back four that could play top-end Championship. You know, they haven't just got the buy-in power. They've actually come down with a squad that shouldn't have come down. They came down, I think, through a little bit of mismanagement. You know, sacking, his name.
John
Eustace, who's at Blackburn now. Sacking him was bad. Bringing Wayne Rooney in was bad. You bring Wayne Rooney in. Honestly, I've got nothing against Wayne, but I think you're in trouble. Plymouth will be in trouble, in my opinion, this season coming. The only question mark, I think, over Birmingham is going to be Chris Davis. If you're the rich kid with all the toys, can you play with them all? Can you keep this squad happy? Can you get it right? Can you go away to Crawley with players that are used to playing at Bayern Munich and PSV and Ajax and come away with something? Can you combat Steve Evans's brutality or his team's brutality? But can you pick apart even, let's say, a Lincoln City? Can you come to Sinsel Bank, and put up with the high press? Will those players settle? That's where the question mark is, because no club's summer strategy goes 100%. So out of Clara, Cochrane, Willemsen, Hansen, one of those players will fail without a doubt. But the fact is, Birmingham have signed so many, and they've got such good players. I mean, like Sung Ho, for instance, is another one who, they're Championship quality. They've no right to be here. They've got no intention of staying here, and I don't think for 1 second that there is a chance that they fail. You could look at Huddersfield and go, well, there's a potential that doesn't go right. You could, and if it doesn't go right, that could be 7th or 8th. You can look at that with Charlton. We've looked at it in the past with Sunderland, with Portsmouth, with Ipswich. Failure for Birmingham is finishing second, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, no, we all put Birmingham, I think, to win the league, didn't we? I don't think it's as plain sailing as you've mentioned. I think I agree. The manager is definitely the question mark, but we at this time. Not this time last season, sort of October, when we hired Michael Skubala, unproven in senior football. We know how much of an influence he's had in improving us. But like you say, there is expectation. I think the biggest challenge that Birmingham will face is the fact that, and I appreciate it's a bit of a cliche, but they're going to be everyone's cup final. They're going to play the best version of every opposition, certainly the first time round at least. And if they're not quite on it, they could come on the wrong side of some results. Maybe I can see a few shock results early in the season, but I just think they've got a squad far stronger than anyone else in the division by quite some margin. And yeah, there are going to be maybe a couple of slip-ups and shocks along the way, but consistency, I think overall, they're just going to they've got better players than the rest of the teams have in this league, and more often than not, that gives you the results that you need. And yeah, absolutely. As much as I wish them to fail, I do. I think they're gonna walk it. To be honest,
do you know what? I don't even wish them to fail. In all honesty, I don't, because they're a fan base who are at their lowest ebb. The ones I've spoken to, the idiots, the football Twitter idiots have come and going, we're going to HMS piss the league, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, whatever. But, the actual hardcore Birmingham City fans that you talk to have been a little bit humble, and they think it's going to be a little more difficult than they envisage. I don't think it is. They're on a one-season stay. Blackburn, I think, came down and went on a one-season stay. I just think they are skewing the division for everybody else. I think that Birmingham's spending actually makes the division look tougher than it is. And we were talking earlier, it's never been this tough. But actually, then we're talking, as we're going through it, we're talking Huddersfield with 26 players, a lot who probably won't play. You said, okay, that adds squad depth. Yeah, I buy that. But it also restricts you a little bit. Peterborough don't really have a defence. Rotherham, will they get found out? Wigan, well, you're kind of hoping that they're going to do well. But if they lose Charlie Hughes, we've questioned Barnsley, we've questioned Blackpool, we've questioned Reading. Wrexham, we've put a lot lower down than we thought. So in actual fact, is it a much more difficult division, or is it just that a lot of teams are spending, your Burtons and your Wycombes, with they're spending a lot of money, and my understanding is that one or two players that we've spoken to have also spoken to those clubs, and the wages are so far apart. I don't know. I think if you take Birmingham out of it, you've only really got Bolton, and you're going, it's Bolton, Huddersfield and Charlton. Well, last season it was Bolton, Derby and Charlton that everybody was suggesting, and look what actually happened. We're on the cusp of it at the end. Yeah,
I think the net strength of the league is tougher. Particularly the teams that are coming up are stronger than those going down. And then obviously you've got Birmingham that add into that. Just quickly, and why I want them to fail. It's not about the fans, by the way. I massively respect Birmingham fans. It's the ownership, and it's not anything against American owners. It's the approach. It's the approach to when they first came in, like you mentioned, sacking John Eustace. You like to think that they've obviously learned from that now, but it was just baffling at the time. And at that point, you just think, well, I hope they fail now after making a ridiculous decision, and they're just rewards for that. And when someone does, it's just jealousy, like you say. I think this time around, because they spent a reported 15 million already in League One. Like, you would love nothing more, just from an underdog's perspective, to see that blow up in their face. I don't think it will. I think they'll walk it, like Doug said. But I'd like it to be tough for them, just because it's interesting and it's a good story. We all like an underdog, and every single team that plays against Birmingham this season, even if you're Huddersfield and you're Bolton, you'll be the underdog in that game. So, that comes with a certain pressure.
Brilliant. It's brilliant for the division. If it's a Birmingham and that they go up, and you get a Plymouth or an Oxford or somebody come down, it takes a big game away. These are the games that when we were playing Bromley and Boreham Wood and Welling, you'd look and you go, well, we'll never be on parity with them. And over the last few seasons, Ipswich and Portsmouth and Birmingham, big clubs keep coming through Sincil Bank, and we're still there. And we're talking about us being potentially 8th. I think we're a little bit lower in some suggestions. I think 442 have got us 13th. Take 13th. If you give me 13th right now and an independent regulator this time next season, I'll take it, and we'll be in a better position than 70% of the teams that we've spoken about today. Now, just quickly to wrap up, I don't know if you've seen the news while we've been on air. I got a WhatsApp but didn't have time to do it. So it's Zach Bradshaw has joined Tranmere Rovers on loan for the whole season. Now, somewhere I may have the press release handy. Let me have a quick look. Here it is. So Zach Bradshaw has joined League Two side Tranmere Rovers on a season-long loan. Just George says, this is a brilliant opportunity for Zach to gain experience in League Two at a good club under an experienced manager to accelerate his pathway towards our collective aim of him playing for Lincoln City in the future. Zach has trained and played well throughout pre-season, impressing Michael and the coaching staff, but the potential long-term benefit for Zach and us from this loan is too good to turn down. We will monitor his progress and look forward to his development. Now, just really quickly, because I can hear my dinner being prepared and we are on a tight schedule here today. I think that's a great loan, because actually when you've been over in Ireland and come back, there is a danger that your next loan is National League and it devalues what you've done in Ireland. If he goes to Tranmere and plays 30 games this season, it could be very much like a Freddie Draper. I know there's high hopes for Zach. I think as a left wing back to play in League Two, I think it's just a great loan at a club that really is League One size. Big ground, plenty of supporters, expected to do well. Superb loan.
Superb loan. Yeah, I hadn't seen that news. Makes total sense for all involved. Total sense. Next logical step after a loan in Ireland as well. He's already played in the National League, of course. So really pleased he's going to get some experience at that level. I know he's obviously, we know kind of behind the scenes, he's seen potentially as a left wing back, has played a few games there pre-season, has also featured at left centre back in pre-season as well. So I thought maybe if he stayed around the squad, was he going to be the backup at left centre back? So maybe I do see us bringing in maybe a lone player of our own to cover Sean at left centre back. But yeah, from Jack's perspective, really good opportunity. From Lincoln's long-term perspective, I think the comparisons with Freddie Draper, obviously different position on the pitch, but same style of loan. I think it absolutely has the potential to have a similar outcome. So yeah, good luck to him. Good move for all involved.
Brilliant. Well, look, it's 1 hour, 20 minutes in, which is less than we thought. So we've done phenomenally well to get through. Next week, we get 1 hour and 20 minutes to talk just about Lincoln City. That will be a deep dive, and you will hear from, hopefully, all four of us at some point. In the meantime, we'll be going to the Arsenal game. We are likely to put out a podcast on Sunday covering Arsenal and the fact that we have spoken to a few of the players today, just to give a little bit of an insight into how that went. Thank you very much for watching. If you are listening in at home, thank you very much indeed. I think 45 people, maximum of 50 were watching, which is phenomenal for tea time on a Thursday. We will be back, as I've said, but in the meantime, up the imps.
Up the imps.